You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gems in Comms series special, brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels in association with Hanson Search, the award-winning international exec search consultancy. I am Ebony Gale, your host for today, and I am super excited to be speaking with the lovely Jennifer Thomas, who is Head of Communications, Data and Analytics at the London Stock Exchange Group. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Ebony. Absolute pleasure to be here. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me. And just to give you a bit of an idea, this podcast is literally about, celebrating people of colour within the communications industry in particular, because we know that, they've been plagued by the truths that are, the industry is basically 91% white. But within that, there are lots of people of colour that are making some great moves. And I feel like this is our chance to give you guys your flowers. So well done to you for making some great moves in the comm sector. And you can tell us a bit about that in a moment, because I want everyone to know about you and what you've achieved. So let's start off with you telling us about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Okay. So let me try and get it nice and succinct for you guys. I like to describe myself as the corporate translator. And what do I mean by that? So corporate, clearly obvious terms. Working in business, I have most of my career, and most of my career has been in financial services. But I realized early on that I have a bit of a knack for taking either complex information. I actually started in tech before I went into financial services, and I'm definitely not a tech person.
Oh, wow.
But just being able to distill sort of big ideas, complex ideas, and hit an audience, right? And get an audience to engage with it. I can articulate that now. Back then, I didn't know what that was. But I just realized it was something I was quite good at, and I enjoyed it. So I've spent, pretty much most of my career, I'd say, exploring communications. And I think a lot of people sort of think communications is a bit one-dimensional, or they'll know a certain aspect of comms, and that's what they think all of comms is. And I've actually just been exploring. So my bread and butter, as I call it, and my first love was corporate or financial communications. And that brings together, I think, my business head. I did an economics degree, so I'd like to think it brings some of the numbers in there, although I say I do words, not numbers. But for me, it's a nice balance of kind of bringing like my business brain with the creativity of communications. And then I basically worked my way through the comms disciplines. So brand and consumer PR, sort of more press office type communications, internal communications, sustainability. So, I've dabbled, shall we say, in all of the areas, just to sort of build up my experience. And the majority of that has been in financial services.
Oh, wow. That's really, really impressive. So have you always wanted to work in communications? Was you attracted to the industry, or did you kind of just fall into it?
I definitely fell into it. And again, I can look back now. It's hindsight's a wonderful thing. Like, I first wanted to be a dancer. So I'd also say I have a dual degree in economics and dance.
High five to
that's
you.
A whole other podcast.
High five. High five to that, okay? Because that's what I wanted to do.
Right? I was like,
I went to the Brit school.
Dancer.
I was thinking about dancing, but then, I took a marketing module and was like, oh, this is really interesting. That's so funny.
But you did better than me. I didn't even go really to performing arts school. It was my love. It was my passion. So performing arts, generally music and sport, actually were sort of my great passions. And I really thought I would do something along those lines for sort of the day job and the career. But I say I fell into communications because I definitely didn't study it. I didn't do, your sort of traditional communications, English degrees, journalism, none of that.
Right.
So hardcore economics. And then I realized, politics, not for me. I don't actually really want to be an economist, but I find it interesting.
Yeah.
And a very long story that I'll make short. In my quest to return back to Britain, where I am born, London, where I'm born, from going to university in America, I started working for a tech startup. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that I started in tech. I am definitely not a tech person, self-disclosure. Not at all. But loved working for this company. Bit of a summer job just to get some cash through the door. And a little bit like what you said, I started working in their marketing team. And I was like, oh, this is a bit interesting. And they were a small business, not big budgets, not big teams. So everything was like guerrilla style, right? How can we do things on the cheap but quick and effective? And I just started picking up a love for, again, it was probably more comms,
right?
Because they did everything, right? Yeah. Everything from pure marketing, advertising, website content, all of it. We used to do trade shows, which
cool. That's gonna be fun. Really busy as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
got to travel all across the world. So it was really like multidiscipline, and I just thought this is interesting. I'll just say it was interesting. And in the midst of one of the summers I was working, which was before my final year of uni, the MD basically said to me, would you want a full-time role when you graduate? And I was like, me? You're talking to me? And he was like, yeah. And I had still 1 year to go of uni, right? And I look back and I'm trying to remember, I don't even think I really signed anything contractually. I think we had a few emails. I was still living in America at the time.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, why not? And in my head, I was like, I can work here for a bit, see how it goes. And that was it, really. So did my whole full year.
That's cool,
kept in contact with them.
Yeah.
Kept in contact, a bit of chit chat over email, nothing overly formal, agreed a rough salary, a start date. That was about it. Rocked up, packed my bags after graduation, moved back to London, turned up on the first day, and he said, oh, can we have a chat? And I thought, uh-oh. So he brings me into the office and he says, look, we've had a bit of a change here. I didn't want to tell you before you came, but the guy you were working with over the summer? And I was like, yeah, I don't think he's going to tell me I don't have a job, basically. Well, he's gone. And there's another guy, the guy that was doing sales. Yeah, he's left. So we have a couple of vacancies. Which one do you want to do? and I was like, well, I don't really have any sales experience. So comms?
Yeah.
Let's do comms.
Let's do comms.
Let's try that. And literally, that was the beginning. Honestly, no word of a lie.
That is so cool, though. That's a great intro into it. Love it. It's
for me, it's that, we talk a lot, amongst ourselves and with mentees and people coming up through the industry about people seeing and identifying something in you that you often don't see in yourself, and having the trust, right, to put you forward for something. Here I was fresh out of uni, and this guy's offering me quite a big job, and I had very little experience in it, if we're honest. But what I later found out is, going back to I'm the corporate translator, is he was really impressed. I was the only non-tech person in the company. So everybody else, absolute expertise in tech. And he was like, you just came in and somehow you understood everything. You knew how to connect with our audiences. They were B2B and B2C, and most of their B2C customers just didn't really understand what they sold.
Right.
And I was a bit like, oh, I'll rewrite your website. If I can understand it, they can understand it. And, that was the beginning. That, to me, was the beginning of something special.
That's great, though. They saw your passion. They saw that, obviously, you could take, like you said, the complex and make it very simple, which is an art.
That's what we do. That's what we do.
I know. It's brilliant. I love your story, and that's amazing, though. Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to move you on a little bit, okay? So that's a great intro into how you got into it. And the fact that you were, you kind of fell into it. Absolutely, didn't you? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to move a little bit into lived experiences, right, within the industry. So I feel like, everyone's story is going to be very different. But I always like to ask a question, which is, when did you become aware of your ethnicity? And now for me, I really, obviously, you're born in the skin you're in, you're born into your Black family, I'm acutely aware of that. But going to secondary school for me was like a real jolt, because that's when I heard about the Chelsea Smilers, who were known to go around and take a razor blade and cut you across your face, a smile across your face, if you were Black or brown. So I remember hearing that going to school, and I was going to school like on Old Kent Road, so, heading towards Bermondsey Ends. So I was like, this is interesting, but also it made me really kind of petrified going to school, very, very acutely aware of the fact that I am different. So that was my kind of moment of becoming really aware of the way you can be treated differently because of the skin you're in. What was your story?
Nothing quite as harrowing as that, thank goodness.
That's good.
Gosh, that's certainly a way to make you think about who you are instantly, right?
Yeah.
But mine was similar, and it's sort of attached to education and school. So not secondary school, ironically, in a way. I actually went to secondary school in Canada, really multiracial, mixed. So that didn't quite hit it for me. Ironically, it's when I went to university, which again might sound a bit odd and a bit late in life. But as I mentioned, I went to uni in the US.
Yeah.
And the reason I became acutely aware, clearly the US has a multitude of different cultures and people from ethnic backgrounds, but it was my moment of what we would call Freshers Week. I can't remember whatever they call it.
Yeah. Freshers Week, yeah.
Yeah, and you sort of land as you do, and it was Black people, you go over here. Latino, Latinx people, you go over here. White people, you go over here. And clearly, this wasn't the voiceover they used. That was
I get it. It's just what your interpretation. Doing. I get it.
Yeah,
but I heard that about American universities quite a lot.
It is, yeah. And on one sense, right, it's not a complete criticism. You can understand the benefits because what they're doing is they're aligning you to your community, depending on what uni you go to, your sororities, frats, all of that stuff. So you have an identified community to connect with it. So I could kind of, at a cerebral level, I get it. But it was really odd for me because I hadn't grown up in that environment. So I'd always grown up in really diverse and mixed environments, right? And I remember I had another friend who, although she was American and mixed race, she went to school in Europe. So we were both looking at each other like, what is this madness?
Yeah, absolutely.
And look, I've got amazing friends still from that community, starting from that first day landing on campus. But it was a real moment through some of the conversations we were having that ironically, I felt disconnected from my own community because I didn't actually feel like I had that much in common from some of my other, colleagues at university, because most of them were American and not from, places outside of America. So their history, as we all know, is very different. I'm already ready to start talking about my Caribbean roots and where my parents are from. And so your reference points are just really different. And different is okay, but it's different.
Yeah.
So that for me, in a sort of
that's quite that, but I can understand that. Yeah, because that is quite a shock, especially coming from over here to go to university and then find that you're literally just segregated. It's like, what's going on? And we just gone back a few years. Like I get it in terms of having communities, but to have it like that to me would be really quite stark. And for you, obviously, like me, we've got Caribbean roots who wouldn't necessarily identify with the American roots. And so then that creates a separation in itself. And then even for your mixed race friend, like where does she go?
Where does she go? And it really was that binary at some points where it's like, we've got an invitation to the Black party. We've also got an invitation to the white party. Right. Which, if you go to one, does it make a statement about the other? Does it make a statement about who you are? And until you really meet loads of people, like over time, it generally wasn't an issue at all. Yeah. But the first few days, weeks where you're, I didn't know anybody. I didn't go there with anybody that I knew. So you're trying to build relationships, and I didn't want to have mono relationships.
Yeah, I get
right.
That.
And it was a real sort of, I don't know what statement I'm making or I'm supposed to make about who I am.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting moment.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because it's, it flips it, doesn't it? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised as well, because I take it you went to, obviously it wasn't a historically black college because it had everybody there, right?
No.
So, it's interesting that they still were so separated. I think it's good to have the communities, but it's interesting that it was so separated. Sounds quite, interesting.
But I'm proud to say all of my friendships lasted the test of time, still friends today.
Oh, brilliant.
These diverse group of friends.
Oh, so amazing. It
does work. It was just weird.
Does. Yeah, it must have been a bit of a culture shock at first, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's got its positives, but also it's got its negatives. Yeah. So, but you got through it, so amazing.
I got through it.
All right, so my other question for you would be, have you ever felt like your race or ethnicity has actually held you back in your career? And have you actually experienced or witnessed racism within the workplace, and how was it handled? If you did witness it.
I'll take that in two parts. So I think there's something about reflection and hindsight, and sometimes you don't really fully understand what's happening in the moment when it's happening.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? So I think my personal story, and as you said, everybody's experience and journey is different, right? Some similarities, I'm sure we have a lot of common ground, but my experience, and I reference back to how I grew up, right? In complete diverse community. So then you're in the workplace. And actually, ironically, not that fintech. It was when I came into financial services. Wow. That was my second moment of difference.
Right.
And the fintech was very diverse, actually. Yeah. Tiny company, but really diverse. So again, I was like, yes, this is familiar to me. Financial service, not so much.
No.
So, I kind of entered, and that was a culture shock for me. And I think I was trying to find myself at the same time. And probably at this stage, it's less about racism per se, but I think it points to your previous question, which is the moment when you really realize you're the minority.
Right.
You're the minority. And there, again, your reference points aren't the same. Your identity is not the same. And how you therefore connect with people is not the same. So my experience sort of early career was feeling like, at the time, I wouldn't say concretely and solely because of my race, I either wasn't progressing or progressing as quickly as I wanted to progress. Mm-hmm. But I do think, looking back now, it has an impact.
Right.
And the impact both sits with me and it also sits with others. And the bit that sat with me is on reflection, I realized I was doing what my parents told me to do. Go work hard, keep your head down, and therefore you'll be rewarded.
You'll be rewarded, yeah. Doesn't always work that way.
Really familiar, right?
Yeah.
Very absolutely. Familiar. That's what a lot of us were brought up to do, right? Absolutely. And actually it worked for me in education. In education, it worked.
Right.
In the workplace, we all know that's not how it works exactly, right? And I found myself on this grind of working really hard, but running on the spot. And not getting as far as I wanted to as quickly as my peers who weren't necessarily running as hard, working as hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And my response to that was just to work harder rather than kind of take in what's happening around me and learn a different way of operating, right? So is that racism? I think as we come to talk about it in 2022, given the journey we've been on as a society globally over the last couple of years, we know a lot of that now is systemic and really built into the infrastructure of society, right? I didn't realize that back then.
Right.
So I kind of had to go on my own journey and learn the rules of engagement is what I call it, right? The rules of engagement, which we all learn at various stages in our career of how to get on, right?
Yeah.
How to get on, the choices you have to make, the things you have to do. And I really took it upon myself to do that. I stopped waiting to be rewarded by other people. And I was like, how do I navigate the system so that I'm there regardless? Some of that was about being, you talked about the gems and the flowers, right? It was about, I have to be absolutely brilliant at what I do. And I don't mean that from an egotistical way, but we all know average doesn't get us anywhere, right?
Yeah.
You have to be way off the mark most of the time just to be just about level if you're lucky, right? So that's where I put my energy. I put my energy into relationships because we know in our world that is really important. We talk about opportunity, networking, being visible, having a voice. So all of that became priorities for me. And I do think it put me in good stead. Now, back to the concrete, have I experienced racism? Yes, is the short answer. I've experienced it, everything from language, comments, how I'm treated. Now, thankfully, not from close peers or bosses, no, but from the wider workforce sector, people you're interacting with in the industry. Yes, I have. I've been really blessed to be surrounded by and to surround myself by allies.
Yeah.
And that points back to where I put my energy. I don't put my energy into people that don't want to be an ally.
Absolutely.
I just don't. That. I say no to that.
That's great. And I've got a question about allyship later on. But yeah, good.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
So, for me, I have, but has it held me back? Well, I can sit here today and say, I'm going to say no, it hasn't held me back.
Good.
But are there moments where it prevented me from moving as fast as I would have liked to have moved? Yes. Sadly, yes.
Yeah, I understand that. And for the points where you had witnessed or experienced racism, whether it be language or behavior towards you, how was that handled? Did you ever take a chance? Did you ever escalate it, or did you just or was it a case of you kind of just thought, you know what, I bet I'm not going to give you my energy? How was it handled?
Yeah. I think when I first started experiencing it, I was still quite junior. So I didn't speak up. I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
You all have, and I'm sure a lot of people can resonate, where you have that moment where you're like, did that just
really happen to me? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Or you get home and you think, hold on, did that really happen? I wish I said this. I wish I said that. And it's like,
yes,
it's
exactly.
Yeah.
So I had those moments. And again, thankfully, it's never been to the extreme end where I had to raise a grievance in any situation, thank goodness. And then, as we all do, we get a bit older, a bit more confident, a bit wiser. And now I just call it out. I just call it out.
Nice.
But again, my point of reference is, I do genuinely believe this now. There are categories of people. So are there racists in our society? Sadly, yes.
Yes.
Most of the time, I'm trying really hard not to engage with those people, because the odds are they're not going to really change who they are for whatever reason, right? And I haven't got time, got things to do. So for the majority, which I'd like to call the majority, where some of the systemic stuff lies.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is lack of awareness and understanding and education. And I think that's what we've seen over the last couple of years. And that's a bit of the aha moment.
Yeah.
The woke moment that a lot of people are having is really understanding the role that they can play in really affecting change, and actually the impact, even those subtle comments or the one-liners or the tone or, whatever it is, the impact that it has on us.
Yeah.
And I described it to one of my managers, and just trying to get her to understand the impact it has, is imagine you've got a white male who experiences comments which you would put in the bucket of disrespectful behavior, language, unfair behavior. Is that right? Definitely not. Is that acceptable in the workplace? Definitely not. Should it be addressed? Definitely. And it would impact that individual regardless.
Absolutely.
So if that white male is here, imagine you overlaid it with a female. She'd start down here. Imagine you then overlaid it with a black female. She'd be down here.
Yeah.
Then a black male. You see where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
So it's this whole idea that things only impact us and somehow nobody else matters. I just don't think is the debate we're trying to have. It's trying to get people to understand the impact is greater. Yeah. So the same thing can happen, but what it does to us is a bigger impact because our point of reference and our starting point is lower.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way I describe it.
That's absolutely. I think you articulated that very well. And I suppose my next question, which you kind of led into, I suppose, what I was going to say, was there ever a time that you wish you had spoken about something? And of course, you just mentioned, hindsight, being younger, you maybe not would have been comfortable, but, going forward, you call it out. And I think that's great. And kudos to you for, being brave enough to call it out as well. So I want to talk about a time where you had to, was there a time where you've had to actually speak up and self-advocate? Would you say that was the conversation you had with a boss? Was that like a key one for you?
Yeah, that was the key one. And look, it's never easy, right? Because we never want to be that person, right? Yeah. Sometimes you start to think, look, I don't want to be the problem child. I want to be the one where everyone rolls their eyes and goes, here we go. Don't want to be that person. But, back to your previous question of, regrets. I don't want to have any regrets either. And when I do speak up, yes, okay, it's about me, but it's bigger than me, right? It's about the voices who aren't in the room. It's about the people that aren't yet courageous enough to speak up. Yeah. And so I take that responsibility very seriously because it's bigger than me, right? It's bigger than me. And it would be easy for me to just go, oh, I haven't got energy for that. Do you know what I mean? I'll let that one go. But then for me, I'm doing an absolute disservice for everybody that's coming through behind us. Right?
You. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have a duty. And when we think about our history, again, whatever your reference point is for our Black history, think about what those generations went through for us, right?
Yeah.
And in comparison, we have it a lot easier, right?
Absolutely.
So if all I need to do is call some stuff out and stamp it out, I should be able to do that.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I feel like that as well, because I feel like our ancestors went through quite so much, and it's like we should be able to be brave enough to do this. But again, everyone's situation is very different, and it's nuanced. Yeah. It's also about, doing what you feel comfortable with. But, where you can, then you use your voice. Absolutely agree with that. Okay. So can you, I want to speak about code switching, right? So I feel like code switching is something that, everybody does actually, whether you're white or Black, I feel like we all kind of code switch. So I wanted to ask, do you feel like there'll be ever a time when we can just lead with our authentic voices within the workplace, or will we forever be code switching?
This is a toughie. I was literally having this conversation with a colleague earlier this morning. We were talking about hair. And, I was saying, at my last place, I'd been there for donkey's years. Everybody knew me really well. So I felt really confident coming in with my red hair or my blonde highlights or whatever it was. And she was saying, I feel really confident coming in my braids. And then we were having this conversation of, can you do that now? Do we do that now? So it's interesting. And I know code switching is a bit more around sort of the language and kind of how you carry yourself. But I think your how you look and how you turn up is also part of that code switching.
Absolutely.
So I wish it was a simple yes, no answer, but I don't think it is. So I think, and God, it's just so different, right? On where you work, who you work for.
Absolutely.
It really is a minefield. It's the culture, But I would say this, I think there's never been a better time than as we sit here today to be your authentic self. That's the way I'd put it. I think there's never been a better time, with all the caveats I said before.
Yeah.
I also think how you turn up is as much about your own comfort as well as it is about everybody else around you and the environment and the culture and how it's received. So I do think it goes both ways. I'd like to think we can just turn up as who we are, regardless, right? Companies are falling all over themselves to talk about bring all yourself to work, be your authentic self. It's all about you. We welcome difference. Pick your phrase. Pick your phrase. Companies are falling over backward to say it. So I think now's the time to test, right? Let's test those values,
the waters, huh?
Right? That the organizations are saying they uphold, right?
Yeah.
Be your true self doesn't mean be your true self, but do first. That's not being your true self, right? Now that said, the spin is maybe controversial, so I'm okay for the audience to disagree with me. This is just a real personal view for me, which might not be shared by others. But like anything in life, so if we think about our personal lives, right? You start by saying we code switch all the time in our circle of friends, with our parents versus our friends, with older generation versus younger. Like we're doing this all the time as human beings. Does that necessarily mean you're not being authentic? I don't think so. What that means is actually you're learning to flex different elements of your personality so that you can engage with your audience, right? Again, comms people, this is what we do.
It's coming through.
This is what we do all day long, right?
Yeah. So,
and I think that's the fine line. I am not a fan of people reinventing their whole selves to try and fit in with whatever group. This doesn't just have to be about the workplace, right? You wouldn't want to do that with friends because they're probably not your real friends.
mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we talk about this all the time
Yeah.
in social circles. You shouldn't fundamentally have to be somebody who you're not to fit in. I think that's just the ground rule.
Yeah.
But should you have an awareness of your surroundings, who you're talking to, who you're engaging with, what the culture is around you? Yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as human beings, we should be aware of that. Mm-hmm. I think, because that is respectful and polite of others, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about us, right? Or just about you, the individual. And I think to not take that into consideration could also be quite selfish, right? Mm-hmm. And doesn't reflect well on you as the individual. So code switch is a bit of a trigger word.
Yeah.
I would say never turn yourself into somebody who you're not for anyone.
Yeah.
You know, find new friends, people. Find new friends.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Go work somewhere else if that's what you feel you have to do, because that's not right for anyone.
Yeah, I heard that.
But be aware of your environment and think about the different sides of you can dial up or dial down, because we do that as communicators with each other all day long. We do that without even consciously thinking about it.
So true. And good advice, because I feel like slightly differently. I don't necessarily feel like we can be as authentic. Yeah, that's my personal view. I don't necessarily think that, but I also think that's also part of necessarily my upbringing, you know, because I feel like a lot of the younger people coming up, I feel like they can maybe live with their authentic voices to a degree. Whereas maybe because I'm a little bit more coming from an old school background, I feel like it's like, well, there's certain things you just don't really do at work.
Just don't do.
You know what I mean? like, you know, I might talk to my family. I might be, you know, chatting in my pack. Well, I'm not going to come into work and talk necessarily like that. But again, that's also gauging the audience, right? So, I think it's a bit, I think in the ideal world, like what you said is great. I think it's about working out, you know, and dialing up and dialing down what you need to within the environment, but making sure that you're not necessarily changing the whole of you. So I think that's a really good answer, actually. I like that one. So coming back to the industry, when did you become aware of the kind of colour bias within the PR and communications industry? Have you always been aware of it, like once you got into the working world? Or
I think probably it's not until you're trying to move forward and move up, right? I think when you're sort of entry level, just entering, you know, again, for me, my experience was I entered companies and businesses that were just diverse by their very nature. So it just didn't really occur to me at that stage. Now, somebody else might have a very different trajectory if you're trying to, you know, come in through a grad program or do you know what I mean? I'm sure that experience would be very different to the entry I had into the work world. So I think that helped cushion me for a bit, if I'm honest, just because of my birth into comms. So I didn't have that realization till I was trying to move up.
Okay.
And like many sectors, not just comms, you kind of look up and you're like, oh, wait, there's no one that
looks like me.
Like no one, not even one. And I think that was at a stage of my life that I was really, I use the word desperate because I really felt like I needed a mentor.
Okay.
And I've had some amazing mentors and coaches in my life from all different creeds and walks of life, again, which I'm blessed for. But at this time, I had nobody of color. And it was a real moment where I was like, I really feel like I'm yearning for it. I need it, because I guess a little back to that code switching, I definitely didn't feel like I could have the kind of conversation we're having today with my white mentor, for example. And not fearful of consequences, but just, again,
it's just the understanding.
It's the understanding.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
And the level of detail and explaining you have to go into before you're kind of even getting the advice that you know, it just wouldn't work. So I think that was a moment for me. And I went out and I sought myself a Black person to mentor me, because that's what I really needed. And I'll name check Karen Blackett, who graciously agreed to be my mentor, and what a fabulous mentor she's been for years. But I don't even think I really knew how much I needed that until I had her in my life. I tell her that all the time. Um, and it was my wake-up call, and it's somebody, you know, finding somebody who has done the journey, has had the experiences to help you navigate. Like, we do have to navigate this world.
Yeah, absolutely.
The ship's always turning, the rules are changing.
Yeah.
You know, you think you have it figured, so you do need that guidance. So I think that was a real, and that was probably like mid-career, you know, that bit where you're trying to be, just kind of move from sort of manager or move myself up. That was a real challenge. Combined with, like I said, you're looking around you and you're seeing
not enough
other
people
peers
looking like you, and it's like, oh, everyone's moving at different paces to you, and you're a bit like, oh, this is interesting.
You're like, hang on, this is very interesting. Yeah, discuss.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Really interesting. And you touched on allyship earlier, so I wanted to pick your brain on that. So, like, you know, what are your thoughts on allyship, and what does it mean for you? Like, what's a great example of allyship? I feel like the word's bandied about a lot. And, you know, what does it really mean for you? Or is it one of those trigger words when you're like, I don't even want to hear that word anymore?
It's becoming that. It's really close to that. But I think for me, I start with it's got to be more than words and intent, right? You can't just be an ally and, I don't know, ally name only.
Yeah.
Because allyship or advocacy, let's call it advocacy, because that's more of an active word. It requires you to do something.
Yeah.
Not be something. It requires you to do something. And I really think that's where change happens, right? And I think that's where we as a community get really frustrated because we're tired of talking. And great that people are listening, but to a certain degree, it's like, that's all well and good. We need some action now, right? And the action, again, could be controversial, but let's debate. Let's throw it out to the audience. Let's hone in on Black people. We, in of itself, cannot be the change. We, in of ourselves, cannot be the change simply because of the environment we operate in.
Absolutely. And the systemicness.
Which is systemicness, which is a bit sad, but it's true. So therefore, we need allyship. We need action. And we need to be able to partner. We need people who can understand our reference point and really understand where we're coming from and work with us to get the change that we need if we're going to move anything forward. And I think that's really important. So I do think allyship's important, but I think, you know, there's a danger zone of being an ally name only. And that's not a true ally to me. An ally is not just somebody that stands with you, but they march with you, they fight for you, they speak up so that you don't have to, actually. They speak up and then they take action. Like, that's advocacy, right? And that is what would be fabulous to have everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. Absolutely agree, completely. So another thing I wanted to ask you about was more about you and what kind of motivates you to keep going.
Depends what day of the week you ask me. I think overall, it's something, and again, I was talking to somebody in my team about this yesterday. I need things that feed my soul. That's what keeps me going. So I absolutely love my career. I love what I do, or I wouldn't be doing it, but I genuinely love what I do. I'm loving it here at LSEG, but it's not the only facet of me. So what I have learned in my lovely older age, and going back to right where we started, we're all made up of different facets of ourselves, right? And again, I didn't realize it when I was a child, but there was probably a really good reason I was, you know, interested in economics, but dance and music and sport, because they're all genuine sides of me. So I need to be able to tap into all of those sides. And that helps propel me forward. And we know, life being the way it is, you know, sometimes not everything's firing brilliantly and not everything is going in the direction we want it to go when we want it to go there. So actually having many things that feed my soul allows me, when something over here is not quite working as I want it to work, I can put some more energy over there, and that would feed me and motivate me to deal with the challenges that are over here. Right. So that has become more important to me as I've got older. My family and my children, bedrock. Yeah. So started with my parents. I've now got my own young family. My boys, my husband and I talk about everything we do as for our kids. And I know, of course, that's what parents say, and, but it's genuinely true. I talked about everything I'm doing is larger than me. It's not about me, actually. It's about what we're teaching and showing our children. It's about the legacy we leave for them. It's about the confidence we want to instill in them, the success we want them to have. So I can't quit, right? I can't give in, because there's a higher purpose. I have a higher purpose. Absolutely. And, that's our children. So family, I've got an amazing circle of friends. Support system's really important. Life isn't great all the time, right? No. And it's really easy to look into somebody else's life and think it's perfect and look what they've done, but it isn't, right? Yeah. So I am not here where I am today by myself. I didn't get here by myself. I got here with a lovely army of people surrounding me and helping me and picking me up when I fell down. So, all of those things collectively keep me going on a really bad day.
That's good though. You need that, don't you? It's all part of the balance, isn't it? So it is. That's important, and you're aware of what keeps you going. So I think that's really important. Yeah. So what would you say you found most challenging on your journey so far?
Most challenging? Probably finding my voice. I've kind of made it sound easy in this chat. Like, I just woke up one day and I had confidence and I was speaking up. It wasn't. Yeah. Finding my voice, leaning in, we've talked a lot about today of awareness of who you are, being Black, that's a journey. It's a journey, and it's not just one incident or, experience. It's a multitude of things. And so along the way, I've had some real lows. I've had some real lows in my life, and lows that I didn't think I'd come back from. So, really emerging from that and having a true understanding of who I am and being really comfortable with who I am is really important to me. Yeah. Really important to me, because I got very, very lost, years ago, and I don't want to ever go back there. So it's important. And I go back to the support system and people picking me up when I couldn't pick myself up. So it's been probably less about work challenges per se. It's been personal, personal life challenges that have impacted me at work or just impacted my well-being or how I turn up, right? Those have been my biggest challenges.
Absolutely get that. Because even things like, even seeing things like George Floyd and things like that, that has an impact on people around the world, particularly people of colour. And I don't think everyone realises the amount of trauma that Black people are walking around with because of those sort of fears or those things that have happened. So there's a lot to sort of unpick and manage, and mental health is really, really important to keep an eye on,
Definitely.
So moving a little bit into the employer side of things, I wanted to ask you, so, people looking for jobs all the time and, talk about wanting to have a great environment. You just mentioned that you're really having a great time where you are now. So what is it that you want from your employer when you're looking for roles, and what makes a good working environment for you?
Well, this is really interesting at this life stage that I'm at. So I think if you'd asked me that question, 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, it would have been all the really typical stuff. So, the job's got to be interesting. It's got to sort of fulfill all my capabilities and needs, a good brand, perhaps, good reputation, all of those things, good money, obviously. All of those things are still valid. I think my biggest and probably the bit that I've dialed up more so now is it's everything we've talked about today. It's culture, it's environment. Yeah. And that actually trumps a lot of those other things. A lot of
the other things, I can imagine.
And again, I didn't recognize how important that was to me until I was in an environment where I didn't have it. And so I search for that probably in a way that I definitely never used to, or even probably consider. And And I've had really good luck of the draw that I've kind of landed places and it's been great, but that has been luck as opposed to me seeking it out.
Right.
Whereas now I actively seek it out. And it's not an easy thing. You know, you talked about, you know, people are job hunting, looking for roles, applying. It's not the kind of thing you get from an ad or, you know, a role description, because as we know, all the lovely words will be used. It will say all the right things.
Yeah.
And I think our challenge is to really lift under the bonnet during the interview process and remember that an interview process is two-way. We, you know, and I include myself in this. We go into interviews and we're like, oh God, it's like them interviewing me. And it's all about what I can demonstrate, I can bring to the organization.
Yeah.
This is a little courting dance we're doing here. So you said organization.
Yes, I have the same attitude.
You need to entice me.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that I was the only crazy one like that. I am definitely like that too. Because when I used to go for interviews, I used to be like, well, is this two-way? Do I want to work with you people? You know, you want to interview me. I want do I like your energy? Is this a good place? Do I need to be here? You know, so absolutely agree with you on that. I think that's so important when you are looking.
But it's so easy to forget. Like it's so easy to forget. And so we have to, you know, if we don't remember ourselves, have someone around you that can remind you that that's what we're doing here. It's a two-way dance.
Yeah.
It's not just one way. And there are different ways to, like, it's not a fail-safe process. Sometimes, you know, you really genuinely think something's great and it's the right fit for you, and you walk in and it's not. And that can also be hard because quite often we don't have the luxury of just turning around and walking back out the door.
Exactly.
But I think, you know, again, where as much as you can, give yourself as much choice and almost latitude to be in control of your own destiny.
Your own destiny is possible.
And if you are somewhere where you really feel like you don't fit, it's not the culture for you, or dare I even say it's really damaging to you on a personal level, you might not have to stay there as much as you think you have to stay there. What you might have to do is stay there for a period of time while you work out your exit strategy, for instance.
Exactly.
And so, you know, there are different ways to think about it. I speak to people who generally feel like they're stuck somewhere, that they're really unhappy, and that breaks my heart. And it's about finding different options, and there might be some timing to put around those options so that you can fulfill your financial needs, your well-being needs, your family needs, all of that. But, you know, there's nothing to stop you from planning moving somewhere else where you can be happier. So again, it's another, remember how happy you are in a role is just as important as is your employer happy with you.
Absolutely agree with you. Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. You know, cut from the same cloth when it comes to that. Absolutely. Definitely. Because my attitude is very much the same. And, you know, obviously I'm independent, but when I was in employment, it was a case of, you know, if you weren't happy, maybe move out to something that's a bit more suitable, but make sure you're happy. Because I've been in that position where you're in a job where actually the job was good, but the people around me were making it really difficult. And it was a horrible environment. So I was like, well, I enjoy the job, but I'm going to have to find something similar to this, but elsewhere, because this environment isn't for me. And I don't feel like I'm excelling it because it was just the very toxic environment. So I feel like you just got to make the decision what's right for you. And sometimes you feel pressured. And I know a lot of people feel like because they're in a job, they've got their mortgages and they feel like they're stuck to it. But no, you can have an exit plan and, you know, execute that so that you can help take yourself out of that. So completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. And another question I asked, which I think is it's just a diversity question, right? Yeah. So what does diversity look like to you? Because I feel like, you know, all the companies are going on about diversity, and inclusion, because they add in the inclusion now, which I'm glad to see. But I feel like the inclusion is important, but I feel like the equity part is the bit that a lot of people are missing. Yeah. But what does it look like for you? What do you think?
Ideally, I would love to erase the words diversity and inclusion from our vocabulary.
Yeah, we don't need it.
Because we don't need it.
So well.
Because it just is.
Yes.
We won't need terms for any of it because it just is. So that's my dream.
Yeah.
So that is my dream. But what it means to me is, if I start from my own point of reference, I don't want to be the only one in the room. And, you know, there's your sort of traditional diversity characteristics, there's diversity of thought. I just want to see a lovely mix.
Yes.
Like, let's not, I don't need all the corporate labels.
Yeah.
I love being in a room, a round table with a group of people, some that have similarities to me because we're human creatures and we seek comfort in those that are like us. And I think there's also something to be said for that. I don't think every element of your life has to be different. We can go too extreme.
Yeah.
So you will like some like-minded people around you, but I love it when someone is literally like the polar opposite for me.
Yeah.
Like, I love it because they challenge me in a different way. I can be like, oh, you had such a brilliant idea. I'm really annoyed that you had that idea. But I love it. I love that you bring that to the table, and I don't actually, and that's also okay.
Yeah.
I love having conversations with people who don't have the same ideas as me or thoughts, right? Because isn't that interesting? So for me, diversity is just about a mix. It's a mix of everything.
Yeah.
Everything, every dimension you could possibly think of. And the reason it's important, and I'll move it away, we know all the obvious corporate reasons why it's important, and I fully believe in those. But ultimately, let's take it back to being human beings who interact with social beings, right? By our very nature. Doesn't it just make life a bit more interesting?
I believe it does. I believe it really does. And for the bottom line too. I mean, it's been shown to prove that, you know, increasing the bottom line for companies. So why not?
Isn't it just a bit more fun, a bit different?
Yeah.
Like, why would we want same? Likewise, I also flip it on its head because it's really easy just to think about it from the minority perspective. But I also wouldn't want to be in a situation where I'm only ever around Black people.
Yeah, you need to want it mixed. I think it's good. I feel like that's fine. I think that's me makes sense. You know, everyone's got their preferences, but I feel like, you mix. For me, I was always the only Black woman in the room. Yeah. So I noticed that, but I've worked in education, I've worked a lot in health. And yes, it was definitely, usually I'm the only one apart from a cross departmental meeting, and I'd be like, oh yes, there's one over there. Yay.
There's
you
one.
know. But exactly. It's almost, spotting somebody who looks like you. But again, it's that point you make, which is actually seeing someone like yourself in the room, but also just seeing a mix, a mix of different people, which is great, different cultures, and they have so much more to bring to the table. So I completely agree with you. Definitely. All right, we're going to move into the proudest moments before we wrap up with mindset, right? So
okay.
So tell us about, your proudest moment. It could be a work or personal one, or a career highlight, if you like.
I think, maybe not obviously, my proudest moment was becoming a mum.
Yeah.
Hands down. Like, the circle of life is pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. Absolutely.
It is pretty amazing.
You have these little mini-me's walking around.
The mini-me's.
Yeah.
Suddenly you've got a whole level of responsibility. It's just, it's weird. Like, I remember my husband and I going to the hospital with our first son. And then it was like, when we come back, there's going to be 3 of us. How weird is that?
That's weird.
You know that, like, realize that there's a whole other person.
There's a whole human being, a little human being here. And they're not going back anywhere.
They're not going back.
back
Right. So definitely proudest moment. And then that continues. Like, again, I think when you have children, you really see your life played out through them. And so we continually have little gems of moments of like, that's really touching, and sometimes the good, bad, and ugly, right? If you'll indulge me in a little story, and this isn't a proudest moment.
People, storytelling is what we do.
Storytelling. So this isn't a proud moment, but it was an insightful moment.
Okay.
And this was in the lead up to George Floyd, before that happened. And my husband was doing the school run, picking the kids up, dropping them home. And they must have been driving by, a police car had pulled over another car and was arresting some people on the side of the road. And my younger son at the time, turned to him and said, Daddy, why are all Black people bad?
Oh.
Right?
That is just hot. I'd be like,
it's like,
ooh, yeah.
Oof, that's a moment, right?
Yeah,
it still gives me chills. And I remember my husband calling me at work and he was like, oh, we need a family meeting. we need to have some talks. And it was, I think my son was about, actually it was well before George Floyd, but he was like 7 or 8, like he was still quite young. And actually we sat him down and we had a talk and just trying to understand where that comment came from, what he was thinking of. And he was absorbing everything in his surrounding. He talked about what he sees on the news and on TV. He talked about what he sees on television. He talked about stereotyping how adults talk about Black people. And I was just like, this little being is absorbing.
The sponge, they're little sponges. They are. Yeah.
All of this. So there's that. And then there's the whole thing that he was talking about Black people as if he wasn't part, like he wasn't Black, which was also odd. That was a real moment for us. And actually flipping it back to a proud moment was just our realization of how we probably actually weren't doing a good enough job to engross our children in our culture, right? And sort of kind of hoping, thinking they're absorbing all the right things because we think we're exposing them to all the right things, but actually the negativity is what's dominating in their mind. So the proud moment is how I think, they're a few years older now and how we've turned that around. And we use that as a real teaching moment for them. Some of the things we wish we still didn't have to teach our children, but sadly we do. But it was, I think, hopefully in years to come, when someone asked them about their Blackness and when they first realized they were Black, I think that was a moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I think that was a moment for them. So my kids continue to be my proudest moment.
That was a difficult one, though, Jennifer.
But
because I mean, that's heart wrenching, and
right?
it's so difficult because you want to explain it, and you it's hard with the media, the way that they paint the picture of us, the images. Then you walk past, you see someone getting pulled over, you have no idea what that's going on there, but you just see a Black person, and you're thinking, poor little kid is just thinking, what is going on here?
What?
It was
heartbreaking.
Terrible. It is
heartbreaking. Like it literally brought tears to my eyes, and if I continue to talk about it, it would still do, because it was heartbreaking for us. Absolutely heartbreaking.
Obviously, you got through to him. You got to explain it, and
we got to explain. Brilliant. Yeah, we totally turned it around. We turned it around. And then I think with my work hat on, I kind of go back to some of the adversity that I have experienced in my life. And when I look back at that, I think, my God, where I am today, like, back then, when I was as low as I could have been, I never in a quadrillion years would have thought I'd be sitting here talking to you. Like, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. So I am really proud of everything that has led me up to this point, what I'm doing now, and hopefully what I'll do in the future, whatever that is. So it makes me proud, not just for the sort of pure success of I've got this role or I'm working for this company, but just the achievements I've been able to have despite some of the real life challenges that I've had along the way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's good. Be proud, absolutely. So, what are your thoughts about how you think the industry will evolve over the next few years? Because I feel like things are changing everywhere, but what do you think will be on hold?
I really hope we don't lose momentum. I really do. I fear that we might. It's a genuine fear. I don't want us to lose momentum. I think we need to keep the energy up. We need those advocates.
Yeah.
We need the advocacy. We need to not fall off the agenda.
Yeah, which happens easily.
So I really hope this continues to be a turning point, and actually we'll be, in X number of years having a podcast talking about, do you see how diverse
it is
comms is now in our industries? Do you remember when there was one or two of us?
Yeah, exactly.
And now there's double digit, triple digit, that is what I genuinely hope. I continually see lots of amazing talent coming into our industry.
Yeah.
It isn't staying in our industry.
Retaining talent is the key, isn't it? It's retaining the talent.
So I really want us to think about what retaining talent looks like, and that is the inclusion point, right? You can bring diversity all you like. But if we don't feel like we fit, if we don't feel included, if we don't feel part of the environment,
we won't stay around. Absolutely.
We're not going to stay around.
Absolutely.
And the younger generation definitely is not going to stay around. Yeah. So I would really hope and like to see that shift a bit quicker than it is at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So let's hope we'll be having a very different conversation in the not too distant future.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what kind of key lessons have you learned throughout your career? What advice would you give to young people of colour considering entering the industry?
So given everything I talked about identity, know yourself is my big takeaway. And sometimes that's hard, right? Because we find ourselves in different ways at different points in our lives. So it's not a hard, fast rule, but I spent a lot of energy trying to be what somebody kept telling me I should be or could be or whatever.
Right.
And I didn't spend enough time in my early career figuring out who I was and therefore who I wanted to be and then working towards that. I figured that out really late. I do think the younger generation is ahead of us already on that, which I love.
Yeah.
Which I love. I do think there's a bit of a generational, we talked about that, just kind of upbringing, kind of what you're told and the rules you follow. So I'm hoping that will naturally happen, but that would be my top tip. Because when you have a real strong anchor of who you are, a lot of these challenges that we've talked about today are easier to navigate.
Easier to navigate, absolutely. Yeah,
they are easier to navigate. So I would do what you need to do to have some real soul searching time to figure that out and surround yourself. So top tip number 2, surround yourself with people that want to see you succeed.
Yeah. Very good advice.
Not everybody wants
to see you win. Yeah. Very true.
Right. Find the people that really want to see you win, and that support system will become phenomenal.
Yeah.
It will be phenomenal. And it doesn't have to be hundreds of people. 1 or 2 is fabulous.
It's fabulous.
That's all you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all you need. But find them, suss them out, and then hang on to them for dear life, because they will pick you up when you're down. They will give you the advice and guidance you need. It enables you to be able to bounce. Yeah. It also enables you to have a safe space to be yourself, so right? A really safe space. So I'm a big believer in that. And that includes, I'm not just talking work, right? Your whole life, ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I've seen people surround themselves with friends that don't have, questionable whether they're friends, but they're not interested in seeing them succeed. And so therefore they bring you down rather than lift you up. So it's your whole circle is quite important.
Yeah. Very good advice there. Very good advice. And onto the mindset, because we're wrapping up a bit now. So how do you deal with the kind of internal mindset war? Because, we've got, limiting beliefs. We've got sometimes some days we've got negative thoughts coming in. And I do say that the majority of our thoughts are negative. So we have to work harder to, pushing the positive. So what kind of things do you do to kind of deal with that?
I'll go back to the support system. That's why I built the support system. And I include my husband as a pillar in that. He's brilliant at sort of challenging me, pushing me, so when you're thinking of your partners,
get someone who's really important. Yeah.
Really important, right?
Yeah.
So it starts there, starts at home. But again, I go back to the different facets of myself. So when my mindset's a bit blurry, when the negative thoughts are there, when I'm having my imposter syndrome, when I feel like I can't do it, because that happens. I mean, I'm sure at least one of those thoughts, everybody.
Yeah.
I draw on other things. And like you said, the psychology is we actually look for the things that qualify our limiting beliefs. So I consciously look for the things that qualify my greatness.
Good.
And kind of reinforce why I am good enough, why I should be at the table, why I deserve to be here. I don't need to be grateful. I deserve to be here. I do come from a sporting background, so mindset's really important in sport, and I draw on that every day. And again, I don't think I appreciated that when I was doing sport. It's also why, again, another podcast, but why I believe sport is so important in school. It's not just about being an elite athlete. It fundamentally builds resilience.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your skill level is, but it tests you in a very different way. So I draw on that every day, and I'm a firm believer in it enables me to turn up very differently in the workplace, because I can go in my zone. I know how to go in my zone and do tunnel vision and focus in. I know how to push myself to an uncomfortable place so that I can grow and propel forward. I know how to work my competition. I know how, all of those things are from sport.
Amazing.
So it does enable me to kind of get my head right. When it's not feeling right.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually. I didn't really think about that, but you're right. When you think about sports and what it teaches you, Absolutely spot on. And I was going to ask you how you managed self-limiting beliefs, but you covered it anyway. So looking back on your journey, would you do it all over again?
Ooh. I think the answer is yes to that, because I truly believe there are no mistakes. I think things need to happen the way they need to happen for us to get to where we're getting, to get to where we're going.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes we don't understand why. But I do. That's my belief system.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would change anything, because it's like one of those movies, right? Like, if you went through that door instead of that door, what would your life be?
What would it be like?
What would it be now? I don't know. And maybe it would be equally as good. Maybe it would be better. I don't know. I don't know. But I know that I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I know the journey that I went on was the thing that I needed to do to get me here.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I agree with that. And a little bit of a cheek question. So what's the best and worst advice you've been given?
So the best advice I was given was know your value.
Yeah.
And your self-worth. Which I was
very
like,
good advice.
That's a bit powerful. That was from the wonderful Karen Blackett.
Amazing.
The worst advice I ever got, which I got several times, actually, quite interestingly enough, was you need to be more aggressive in the workplace.
Ooh. Sorry?
Exactly. What? If you want to be a senior leader, you're going to have to lose a bit of that passion and just be more assertive and more aggressive. I read that as in, I think they were telling me to be a bit more like a man and less like a woman. I don't know. I don't know what it meant, but I didn't take kindly to it.
No, I wouldn't have either. You know, less passion. I mean, what are we doing here?
You're too
more
passionate.
Aggressive. Did this person realize that they're speaking to Black women who are typically seen as, you know, angry Black women, and you're saying we should go and be more aggressive? Okay, so what? Just put a stereotype on my forehead. Should I just walk around? I mean, this is crazy. Absolutely interesting advice.
Ludicrous.
Wow. Well, we know you didn't take that advice, so that's fine. Oh my goodness me. Well, my last question for you is, do you have any rules that you've implemented along your career journey, like to help you go forward?
Rules.
Well, I picked up one of your rules, which you said about, going for the interviews, two-way process.
Yeah, two-way process. Yeah, that's definitely one of them. Know yourself is also a rule. I do think it is a rule.
Know your value.
Know your value is another one. And I think the other one is never go back. Don't go backwards.
Don't go backwards.
My husband told me that one.
Yeah, interesting.
Don't go backwards. Everything you do, like everything, must be something that propels you
forward. Yeah.
From the tiniest thing all the way through to the biggest thing. If it's not adding value to your life, to your career, to who you are, waste of time.
Yeah, it's good advice. Very good advice from your husband. I like that one. I think I'll nick that one too.
It is a brilliant one. It is a brilliant one. And therefore, I tell people that I don't do anything by accident. Nothing you see me doing is accidental.
Yeah.
It's purposeful. It's what I want to be doing. There's a reason for me doing. I just don't do stuff that doesn't give me something back.
Yeah, I heard that. Amazing, Jennifer. Thank you. I can't believe you've gotten to the end of it. I've enjoyed chatting with you.
This has been great.
It's been so wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us. Okay. And it has been wonderful speaking to you. Now, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, I suppose they can find you on LinkedIn, right?
They can.
Okay.
Ping me, connect with me.
On LinkedIn, Jennifer Thomas, the wonderful Jennifer Thomas. So thank you so much. It has been wonderful speaking with you, Jennifer Thomas, who is head of comms, data and analytics for the London Stock Exchange Group. And I will be back again speaking with some more comms colleagues pretty soon. So stay tuned and thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely loved it.
Thank you.